We love talking all things rimfire. In this episode, that's exactly what we do. We interview Michael Shea, who is the author of the recently released book, The Rimfire Revolution, a complete guide to modern .22 rifles. We talk about barrel lengths, twist rates, cleaning, and the history of the .22 and everything else rimfire related. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I am your host, Scott Volkortson. This week's guest has 15 years of experience in the outdoor world, everything from hunting, fishing, wilderness, and adventure. He is the senior editor at Free Range American, Black Rifle Coffee Company, editor at large for Field and Stream, as well as a contributing writer for Men's Journal, and a contributing editor for Shop Business. And lastly, and right in our wheelhouse, he is the rimfire guy at Gun Digest, who just recently released his latest book, Rimfire Revolution, a complete guide to modern .22 rifles. Welcome to the show, Michael Shea. How are you doing, Michael?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm excited about this one. First, congratulations on your book. It was excellent all the way around, so well done on that part of it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. With your depth and experience and expertise in the field, that means a lot.
And we are definitely going to dive into the book. But first, can you give our listeners a little background on how you became so involved in the outdoor world? Was it something you did as a kid or something that I know in doing my research, you went to Columbia University, which doesn't seem like a normal segue into the outdoor world?
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a atypical path. So I grew up in New England and did a lot of outdoor stuff. My dad was a big fisherman. He ran marathons. Like, we were very active as kids, and we did a lot of stuff on the water. My family's from Rhode Island, so it's very much like an ocean culture. But I did not hunt, and guns were just simply not part of the equation. Like, it just politically, socially, it just wasn't something that was part of my life as a young person. I went to college, and I always liked writing, and I became a newspaper reporter, and I traveled around. I was in originally South Carolina, and then I went to California, and I jumped at a chance to write about fishing because that was kind of my first love. And I did a salmon trip in Bodega Bay, north of San Francisco, actually with guys from my barber shop. And I covered this little rural town in the Central Valley. And one of the guys on the boat, frankly, started busting my chops about being a liberal media and, Hillary Clinton, and just went down the rabbit hole of politics. And then he said something. He said, you guys don't even cover deer season anymore. And that's bigger than Christmas in this part of the world. And on that point, he's 100% right. And I kind of just wanted to shut this guy up, frankly. And I said, well, if you take me hunting, I'll write about it. And he just smiled and he said, I'm a hunting education instructor. And so I did a whole story on how an adult, it's funny to think of myself as an adult back then. I guess I was 23, 24. But how a young adult who didn't grow up around guns or around hunting could get involved in it. So I did a newspaper story on that. I duck hunted with him. I duck hunted with some other people who kind of knew my work as a newspaper reporter. And man, I had this moment where I shot a canvasback. It was a hard crossing shot about 40 yards out, and I got up and just no mind, I dumped this duck, and I describe it like a hook set in a bass. It changed the whole course of my life. So the newspapers were sort of getting eroded by the internet. This was in the late 2000, late aughts, and I decided I wanted to go to grad school. So I went to I did. As you mentioned, I came back east. I knew I wasn't a California person, so I wanted to see New York City. Kind of as a writer, that was sort of something that was on my checklist. So I went to grad school at Columbia for nonfiction writing. And again, kind of like happenstance, like everybody in there was writing like personal memoirs or, reported history or whatnot. And I was in the writing workshop, like writing these little profiles of duck hunters. And a friend came in and said, hey, Outdoor Life is looking for an intern. You'd be perfect. And I didn't know this at the time, but Field & Stream and Outdoor Life were owned by the same company, and they had offices in Manhattan. Still do, I believe. And I wrote them a letter, and I was like, I would be perfect because I love duck hunting, and I was a newspaper reporter, and I'm at Columbia, and blah, blah, blah. And Camille, the managing editor at the time, wrote me back like right away. She was like, you are perfect. Come be an intern. And that sort of like jump-started a 10 or maybe 12-year now relationship with Field & Stream and Outdoor Life. And I've really kind of been in the outdoor space ever since.
And that's crazy because as you tell that story, so many times when we get our chops busted, we become defensive and not even open to new ideas. So as that guy was, giving you crap on, quote unquote, the liberal media, instead of you running away from it or becoming defensive, you're like, okay, just let me go do it with you, which is probably not the attitude that a lot of people would have taken during something like that. And then to his credit, he must have been very welcoming, bringing you on that hunt to get you hooked so quickly into that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he was a great kind of early mentor, not just on the licensing and the sort of, I now like flash forward almost 20 years and I bring a lot of, I'm a hunter education instructor. I take a lot of non-traditional hunters out on their first hunt. I've done that multiple times. I try to get at least one new person who I personally take every year. And like I joke with them, like you have to be an attorney to figure out how to do this if you're coming into it cold. And so like Bob was really good at explaining that, like the legality of like how to get licensed, how to get involved, how to do it yourself. But then he also like really kind of welcomed me into the culture. So like I had dinner at his house and ate one of the ducks I killed and like went to his duck club. I went and shot trap at his sportsman's club. So it was very much like a legal kind of rule book introduction of like, this is how you do it, but then also a much softer and broader sort of welcoming into the culture. And once I was there, like all the bullshit about politics and voting and Hillary Clinton, like all that went away. And then we were on the firing line and we were talking about shotguns or we were talking about ducks. And I fell in love with that world. So yeah, he did a great job.
So, and along those same lines, so like when you bring new people, I know one of the questions I get a lot is how people can, because the barrier to entry sometimes seems like it's very steep for people that have never been involved in the outdoor hunting world. So what are like some tips or advice you can give people when they're introducing new people to that world?
Yeah. So, I kind of start with an early kind of high bar and, because I have a lot of people who reach out to me, and a lot of them they'll watch a meat eater or they'll hear a Rogan podcast, and they're like, I want a bow hunt. And my response to that is awesome. I will take you through this process. The first thing you need to do is get a hunter education card and get your archery endorsement in that particular case. I'll send them the links to Calcamy, where they can do it in whatever state they're in, and then I disconnect. And the reason for that is like I want the interest to be real. Like an old friend who texts me, I'm not going to bring them out the following weekend because hunting's too important to me. It's too much of a time suck. And I would say about half the people I reach out to who I've done this with vanish. They never take the class. They never do anything. So like I kind of put that out there and then disconnect. And then if in a couple months or a couple weeks or whatever it is, they get back in touch and they're like, hey, I got my certification. What's next? Then it's off to the races. And I figure out a way to kind of personally spend time with them and introduce them to either guns or archery and then get them on critters.
That's awesome. And that's some great advice too, because like I said, so many people, I think because it can be intimidating when you're first getting into hunting, shooting, whatever it is. And I think that's why it's so important to have people like you or your mentors that can make it something that they want to do. But I like the approach of you letting them get some skin in the game and not just basically handing it all to them or doing all the work for them.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's I mean, you know this, like hunting, shooting, it's a huge commitment. And if they're not gonna kind of commit to the process like early on, I can't imagine them succeeding in the field if everything's handed to them or ever doing it themselves, whereas like pushing them to take a little early action and do part of it themselves, like with getting the right certifications, I think it goes a long way to building success in the field.
I would agree with that. Well, let's shift gears just a little bit and now dive into the book, The Rimfire Revolution.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like I said, I was a big fan of it as I read through it. The one thing that stuck out to me was I feel like it's something that could be read by beginners or experts alike because of how you approached it from there's a lot of technical information in there, but yet it was done in a way that was very easy to follow and very easy to read, even if you weren't, if you're not heavily involved in the rimfire world. So I guess first, what was the inspiration behind writing the book?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that any kind of long content project, whether it's a book or a video or anything in our space, that's always a challenge, is like make it appealing, but not so appealing that you like lose the experts, right? So that's something I thought a lot about. But the genesis of the book, really, like, I personally just fell down the rabbit hole, and I got so deeply obsessed with these rifles and with NRL 22. It started with really a story I wrote for Field and Stream on NRL 22. I had seen something online about super accurate rimfire rifles. I ended up getting a Lithgow, which is mentioned in the book. And I live in the country. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And in my office, I got a sliding glass door and I got 50 yards I can shoot. And I have a big shooting bench. So, I mean, I can walk 5 steps and be from my computer to shooting a rifle. And so I set up this Lithgow and got some good ammo, and I just couldn't believe how accurate it was. Actually, I missed a step. It started originally with squirrel hunting and with the 17 Mach 2, and I got wrapped up in the 17s first, then got the Lithgow and thought, what can I do with this 22, and found NRL 22. Ended up writing a story for Field and Stream that went kind of viral. Like, it did really well for them. And in talking to Travis and Tyler, the NRL 22 guys, at the month after that story came out, they picked up something like 30 clubs, signed up and submitted scores that month. So there was like this major kind of reaction to this story. And I just, like I said, I just fell down the rabbit hole. Like I spent, I guess that was probably 3 years ago now. And like all my free time, all my free money went into either tuning 17s or testing 17s for squirrel hunting, or doing the same thing with 22s for NRL 22. And like I had like a huge advantage that, you know, I spoke to you about the Summit when you brought it out in 17 Mach 2 at SHOT Show. And like, I walked up to you and I said, "Hi, I'm Mike Shea with Field and Stream." And like, you being a smart businessman are going to give me the time of day. When I called Voodoo and when I called Ruger and said, "Hey, I'm with Field and Stream," like I instantly had access to experts. So I could ask them all the nerd questions that really I wasn't writing I was writing a lot for Field and Stream, but not to the level of my questions. So I had like all of this information, all of these contacts as I was learning in the sport. And then I was spending a lot of time online, and like I kind of had like a love-hate relationship with the forums. So I'd spend a lot of time on Rimfire Central, a lot of time on Sniper's Hide, and often get the answer I was looking for in whatever I was doing, like tuning a 1022 trigger or whatever. But I'd have to like sort through so much BS and so many comments and side things to kind of get the answer at the bottom of those forums. And I kind of loved the search for it, so it was like very much a love-hate thing. But then I started writing more and more about this stuff for Gun Digest, and I kind of said to him at SHOT Show, I guess it was 2 years ago now, I was like, "Hey, I want to do a rimfire book and just take all of these contacts and all of these interviews and all of these stories I've written and all of this like internet research that's sucked up at that point 2.5 years of my life, and just put it in one place." So like, it's, you know, the rimfire world, as you guys know, it's super niche. This will never be a bestseller. This will never be on a New York Times list. But like, someone who's interested in this, like there's one stop. And like, I'm not saying that my book is like the be all or end all, but I do think like I've collated enough information from experts like yourself that like it's almost like there's like a foundational text now. There's one place you can go. So if you're like, this rimfire thing, you know, you can spend $25-$30 and get a book and get like the crash course to everything that is this discipline. And so that was kind of what I set out to do, and why I wanted to kind of take this like very strong obsession and kind of make something concrete for it. I felt like I could do like a service, if you will, to the community, frankly.
Well, and I think you've definitely done that with it. And I, you know, like I said, I enjoyed reading through it. And, you know, what I appreciate about it is even like guys, you know, from Voodoo, you know, I appreciate what they're doing and continue to pushing the envelope of what a 22 LR can do. You know, and a lot of people will think that there are quote unquote competitors, whatever it is. But in my opinion, the more that we can constantly push what the rimfire market is capable of, it becomes a win-win for all of us. So a lot of times I'll have conversations with even those guys behind the scenes talking about, you know, different things that we've tested, that they've tested, different things that we've found, you know. So the last, you know, with the NRL 22 and then just other long range 22 shooting that's been done, it's been a lot of fun the last few years trying to dial in exactly what a 22 can do. And I think you talk about this in the book, is the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is how much like shooting a 22 can carry over to true long range shooting, and how much of the technique and skills that you learn doing that, you know, will carry over when you get out to 600 yards, 800 yards, and even 1,000 yards, you know, but it's a much easier thing to find 200 yards to shoot a 22 with, and a much more economic way to do it than, you know, shooting the center fires or the larger calibers out to 6, 8, you know, 100 yards.
Yeah, 100%. Rimfire and 22 specifically is a lot less forgiving. So, you know, when you get into shooting mechanics, like how you're loading a bipod, like cant, like how many clicks you're on or off in your scope, because of the wind effect and because of that like artillery trajectory of them dropping so dramatically so quickly, if you're off a little bit, you're off a lot with 22s. Whereas if you're shooting a 308 or a Creedmoor or a centerfire, and until you get at very extreme distances, there's more room for error, right? So it's in the book. Fin accuracy, I think, really kind of pioneered this, but they talked about like the 4X factor. So like shooting a 22 at 200 yards is the rough kind of ballistic equivalent of shooting a 308 at 800 yards. And like to your point, if I try, I can shoot 200 yards in my yard. Like it sucks, but like I've done it. I have a range 30 minutes away and at my actual gun club where I can shoot 200 yards all day long. I have to drive an hour and a half to shoot a tough 600 yards at a friend's place, or I have to drive 3 hours and then I can shoot to nearly a mile, but I got to pay a lot of money to do that in central Pennsylvania. So the access for me in the East, and I think this is the case everywhere, to shoot center fire at 1,000+ yardages, which is what you really need to make it interesting, in my opinion, with the quality of today's gear. It requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of money. Whereas for a brick of 22 and a rifle, I can go to my gun club and do much of the same sort of sniper math and weapon mechanics that at 200 yards in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost. So, you know, I'm a real believer in it as a training tool. But then again, like the NRL 22 guys found out, like they thought NRL 22 would be sort of the minor leagues of National Rifle League. They have more people interested in just the 22 because of the 22, because it's so much fun. So I've definitely become a much better long-range center fire shot because of my time on the 22. But like when I think of shooting, my 22s, I don't really even think of it as like a training case anymore. I'm just doing it because I love the calibers.
I know the one thing we have found is, especially with new shooters, when, you know, time behind the trigger becomes one of the biggest priorities, you can take them to a range and they can shoot a 22 all afternoon long and work on those mechanics, which is not necessarily the case if you go shoot a 308 all day. One, it gets expensive. You know, two, it's obviously there's more recoil, it's louder. You know, and for somebody new, when they're working on, you know, their technique, not having to worry about that flinch of any recoil or anything like that can be invaluable as they're learning. So we've seen it become a, you know, like you said, a training tool, but then we also have a lot of people that just do their regular practice with 22s. And it helps, you know, the like you've talked about this in the book, and I think you mentioned it earlier, the equipment, the barrels, the ammunition, everything has gotten so much better over the last 10, 15, 20 years that it's made it so much more fun to do this.
Yeah. The gear has just gotten incredibly good. The accuracy that guys are getting is, you know, it's, you know, I think definitely in 20 years, but even like 5 years, you know, I feel like Rimfire's just on this wicked upwards trajectory towards precision and accuracy. Just in if you look at, like, I mean, you guys have always kind of been in that. That's always kind of been part of your brand and what you've done. Like Velocities has always been like high quality, accurate, really well-made firearms, really well-made rimfires. But that was not the case for like the larger gun industry, even 6-7 years ago. You know, now like you can get a $300 Savage B22 or $400. Man, that thing's a smoke show. And like, I don't know if, or at least mine is, you know, it's hard to talk about generalities because of the nuances of ammo and setup and tuning and all of that. But I don't know if like 6 years ago you could get a $400 rifle or like the Tika, that has the performance that we're seeing today. It's just rapidly getting more and more accurate and more precise.
I was going to say, even if you look at like what Ruger's done with just the 1022 to their competition model and the different things that they're doing with that, up until probably 5-6 years ago, it was just their standard 1022 with a couple different options. And they've even taken that to a whole new level. And, even with like their BX triggers, everything, the quality has gotten so much better across the board,
yeah.
Which I think overall helps, because obviously one of the things that people always talk about is, rimfire's dirty, rimfire doesn't function. But the more and more that across the board we can up that game and get rid of that, that perception, I think it just helps the entire rimfire market. And I know like you were talking about, one of the areas that we've seen the biggest improvement is like on the 22 mag rimfire.
Yeah.
When we first got into that in the late 90s, it was met with a lot of resistance because they said, who's going to pay that for a rifle when the ammunition just frankly doesn't shoot?
Right.
But we were very fortunate. It was right about that time that the ammunition companies start doing more with the rimfire ammo. And now, we're able to easily get sub MOA groups at 100 yards with, a couple of different 22 mag ammos that are out there.
Yep.
I think across the board, rimfire ammo has just gotten much better.
Yeah, it has. Like those VMAX bullets, when they started loading them in 22 Magnum, it changed the game. And then you start talking about pairing that with like a modern chamber in like a well-made barrel, and all the old news on how it was like an inherently inaccurate round, like that just goes out the window. Like I have a couple sub MOA 22 Magnums in the safe I'm looking at right now, and they're hammers, and it's because to your point, like the ammo is caught up, the market is there now for precision in that caliber, and it's just it's a fantastic choice for a hunting round for sure.
Well, and like you talked about earlier, how there's a segment of guys out there that swear by the 17 Mach 2 as a squirrel round. And
yep.
even that ammunition, it kind of disappeared for a couple years. And then it's made a resurgence over the last, 12 to 18 months, which I know has made a lot of squirrel hunters happy.
Yes.
But even as that has come back, it seems like that ammunition's gotten much better than when that was originally released 15 years ago.
Yeah, it absolutely has. So I spent a pile of money on a couple bricks of Ely 17 Mach 2, and the sort of conventional wisdom was, 17 Mach 2 came out, it didn't work in autoloaders, and so it collapsed and went away. Didn't work on it in a 1022 format. So they stopped making ammo except for the cheap stuff like the Hornady and the CCI, and like Ely got out of it, and that was the only ammo worth a damn. And so I was on the forums, this was probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and a bunch of it came up. So I ended up getting like 4 or 5 bricks of Ely 17 Mach 2. And I accuracy tested it, I weight sorted it, I chronoed it, I did everything I could do to this ammo in comparison to the similar weight Hornady and CCI in multiple guns. I have 4 or 5 Mach 2s. And the Ely came in last place every single time. And I think like you could argue that maybe the ammo was, the ammo was probably like 10 years old, so like maybe that had an effect on it. But like, good Lord, that CCI, like it ran the table across multiple rifles. The Hornady also did excellent. So like there's like the rimfire world, and I think the shooting world, there's like a lot of conventional wisdom and a lot of like truth, like half truths get repeated, especially when you get online and get on the forums. But I mean, I would argue that with current production Mach 2s and the guns that are out there, it's never been as accurate as it is right now. You know, it's another hammer in like an awesome small game round.
I would agree with that. So you touched on something that, you know, our entire industry, we have like a lot of conventional half-truths or even just flat out myths that,
100%.
you know, are repeated and become gospel truth on internet forums. What are some of those that maybe you even believed or that you know, encountered from others, like surrounding rimfire ammunition as you went through this process of writing the book? You know, I know like one that you address in the book is a common misconception of like the 17 HMR wind drift compared to other ammunition.
Yep. That's a big one.
Can you hit on that one real quick?
Yeah, so a lot of people will tell you the 17s are famously accurate, you know, all HMR and the Mach 2. But one of the criticisms of them, and you see this repeated in like the popular press and online and all over, is that it's that tiny 17 grain bullet is powerfully affected by wind. So you'll hear guys say stuff like, yeah, it's a great prairie dog round, but not on a windy day. And when you compare it to center fire, like, yeah, maybe, you know, compared to like a Hornet or whatnot, but that's apples and oranges. When you compare it to other rimfire, you compare it to 22s, it actually bucks the wind better than the rimfire round everyone's been shooting since, you know, the 1900s. So this rep that it's like bad in the wind, like it's just not really the case. I think what's happened is it's actually better in the wind than the 22s, but it took the 17s to get sort of the shooting public to want to hit targets at 100, 200, 300 yards. And so for the first time, they were taking rimfire out that far and thinking, holy crap, the wind, you know? And like, yes, like wind is definitely a factor, but it's less of a factor with a 17 at distance than it is with a 22 rimfire at distance. And that's important, I think, because like I would take the 17 out in any condition if I know my gun, know my ammo, know my data, you know, like it's perfectly acceptable in all conditions. It's my opinion.
Yes. And like you said, though, it almost had become a quote unquote truth that, well, it's a great round as long as the wind's not blowing. Yeah.
I say that about everything, right?
Yeah.
That's my 6mm Creedmoor is way more accurate when there's no wind. Imagine that, you know, like, of course, right?
Yes.
The other one, too, the one that jumped to mind when you asked that question is the cleaning thing. And I haven't talked to you about this, so I'd be really interested in your opinion on it. But I kind of came up and thought, like, rimfire rifles didn't need to be cleaned. And then I talked a lot with Steve B., who was at Anschutz for a long time. He's not there. I think he's currently at Tactical Solutions. Mike Bush of Voodoo. I talked to Luke at Lapua, who's like, he just won the Silhouette Nationals at Ridgeway. He was an NCAA shooter. Talked to Ginny Thrasher, who has a gold medal in the Olympics in shooting. And I asked all these people about cleaning and led with like, so you don't have to clean these rifles. And they looked at me like I had three heads, you know? They were like, you have to clean them often, you know? That's completely false. And there's some nuance to that, but I'm curious, what's your take on barrel cleaning with 22s?
So our take is a little bit different than what a lot of other people say. And I think part of it is if you're going to, at least in our experience, if you're going to shoot like one particular ammunition, I think you can get away without cleaning it as much as some people say that you have to. You know, obviously a lot of it comes down to what type of barrel is installed on there. But when we clean our barrels, the one thing that we do and we've done this for a long time, is, especially if you're trying to achieve bench rest accuracy, what we will do is we will clean the barrels more often, but it's typically with just like a patch that goes through there, a wet patch, and then we'll go back with a dry patch. And in particular, we will spend time cleaning the chamber itself.
Yep.
The one thing that we do differently, like as far as the actions when it comes to cleaning, is with all of our DLC coating that we put on our semi-auto bolts, is we do not clean our action area as often as most people say that you have to.
Mm.
And a lot of that just comes from, we'll get guns in here for repair and they've loaded it up with so much lubricant and so much residue has stuck to that and adhered to that, that there's no chance that that rifle or pistol is going to cycle the way it should and in any sort of way for performance. So we don't clean the action as much as a lot of other people, but like on the barrel, yes, for bench rest accuracy, and I'm not sure what they said as far as round count, but we will still go probably 250 to 500 rounds in between pulling anything through the barrel, even if we are trying to achieve accuracy.
Yeah. That's interesting. So the Olympians and NCAA folks I spoke with basically said after every practice session or 200 rounds, whichever comes first.
The one thing I was going to add to that too is we have found a little bit, it'll come into play, like how long are you going to store that rifle after you've shot it?
Yes.
If you're on a hunt and you're going to take it back out the next day, I don't think it's quite as critical to clean in between those sessions. If you're finishing up on day 4 of a hunt and not going to touch it again for 4 months, even if you only put 25 to 30 rounds through it, I would recommend cleaning it just prior to storage, which a lot of people don't always do. And some of the reason that we've gone that way on cleaning is, and I think it's probably a little bit different if you're dealing with like Olympic level shooters, is we have seen a lot more damage caused by cleaning than what it's going to help.
Yes.
Especially with us doing semi-autos, there's not a great way. I know there's, bore guides and different things out there, but we always want to clean from breech to muzzle. So on with our semi-autos, a lot of times using a pull-through type kit, with a patch is all that's available. But we have found that it has been more than sufficient for, achieving the accuracy that we're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great point. Like, you have to clean correctly. So Dave Petzel, the longtime shooting editor of Field and Stream and like one of my personal heroes, he always said you don't clean a hunting rifle until the accuracy drops off. And his logic behind that recommendation was that more guns are damaged by cleaning than anything else, than field accidents, than anything. So every time a guy steps up and tries to clean his rifle, he's risking like ruining the bore, frankly. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I guess when I think about cleaning, and like there's a real dialed step-by-step guide in the book, though experts argue about that. Cleaning's one of those things everyone has their own opinion, and I just kind of collated the best of the best and printed that. But like in this age of information and in like the ubiquity of cleaning tools, and you could get online and order all the right stuff, including a bore guide to clean your Volquartsen and have it to your house in 2 days' time, right? Like we live in a different world than the gun writers of the 1960s is what I'm trying to say.
And there's a different world of YouTube videos where you can go out and watch proper ways to do it.
Yeah, 100%. So like I preface like all cleaning discussion with this as a way of saying like you have to do it correctly, and like there is a correct way like for your rifle and for your caliber, Yes. But presuming that, I think like the answer is you have to clean them probably more often than you think. And like to your point, like 100%, if you're putting it in a safe and not going to shoot it till next hunting season, primer and gunpowder residue and primer residue, it all draws moisture.
Yes.
This is like the chemical property of the salts in there. So like you're putting that gun in the safe and you're just inviting it to draw in moisture into that bore, which is something you as we all know, you don't want. So yeah, there's definitely, I think, some hard and fast rules. One of them being if it's going in long-term storage, like have the bore oiled and like ready to go, and understand that when you take that out at the start before a match or before a hunting season, you're going to have to put several rounds down the barrel to get back to that accuracy window.
I was just going to bring that point up, that a lot of guys will take their gun out of the safe and they go put it on paper and they're like, it's not as accurate as when I put it in the safe.
Yeah.
But exactly to your point is, we even see this when guys or shooters will want to test, let's say 5 to 10 different ammunitions to see what the most accurate one is. They will take, they load up 10 magazines with whatever it is, 5 rounds each of 10 different types of ammunition, and they put them all on paper, which is, in my opinion, is not a true test, because you have to put, at least 10 to 20 rounds of whichever ammunition you're going to shoot through that bore prior to putting it on paper.
Yeah, 100%.
We've seen that, time and time again, where just because of all the different lubricants and different things that are, the way the ammunition's made, but that's often a overlooked step. So another question I have is, as you did your research and you talked to all the experts like Mike Bush and all those guys, what did you find out in terms of like how barrel length affects accuracy and velocities on rimfire?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are tables out there of like how barrel length sort of affects velocity, and the short of it is like the longer the barrel, I think 22 hits max velocity between like, I want to say it's right around 16 inches. So anything after that, it sort of stabilizes and then it decreases, right?
Yes.
And a gunsmith explained it to me in this way I really like. He said the longer the barrel, the more drag the bullet is imparting, the more drag the barrel is imparting on the bullet, right? So if you imagine that bullet spinning through the land, it's sort of losing gas and the barrel is dragging that bullet back. But what it's doing is it's putting more turns on the bullet, so you're getting more stabilization before the point of exit. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so depending on the twist, the distance being shot, and the ammo varies, like where is that peak point where you cut off barrel length. So it's like it's a many-factored problem, right?
Yes.
I talked about this on the Rimfire Tactical podcast I did with Mike Bush, so I don't think I'm giving anything away. But like they're finding fast twist barrels, like 1 in 12 all the way down to like 1 in 6 for the new copper solids, are showing remarkable accuracy at distance. So, but the rub with the fast twist, when you think about all of these various calculations, is anything under 22 inches, it totally falls apart. So the fast twist needs that extra 2 inches compared to like say a 20-inch kind of target barrel, fairly typical. The fast twist needs those extra inches because it needs that extra drag on the bullet when you're spinning it that fast, right? And then really interesting is I have a 1 in 9 Voodoo here that I've been playing with a lot. And at 50 yards, it's accurate. I actually have a 10-22 with a Schillen Match Select. That's probably my most accurate rifle, and it's a 10-22. at 50 yards with a 20-inch barrel. But when you jump to 100 yards, and especially when you jump to 300 yards, that fast twist barrel is by far the most accurate, like to measures of like half inches, right? So there's some weird science is happening there where it's sort of I don't want to say average accuracy because it's still a smoke show at 50 yards, but it's not like world-class accuracy. It's not bench rest accurate at 50. But when you get to 100, it is an absolute game changer. And I've talked to guys who with a 22 can put rounds in the size of a skull can at 500 yards with Lapua ammo in a fast twist barrel. So like I think that at 22 inches. So I think that's kind of the direction a lot of things are going to go as far as barrels go, and it's this sort of like trifecta between twist, length, and ammo. And ammo being like, are you shooting typical 40 grain lead traditional match ammo, or are you shooting copper solids, reloaded copper solids, which is a whole separate discussion, but absolutely will affect what kind of twist and length you need.
Well, and I think this is just the evolution of how the rimfire game is changing. You know, because for so long it was one size fits all. You know, right. You do a 1 in 16 twist barrel, you do, you know, this approximate length, and then you can go shoot any rimfire ammunition you want, which still holds true for a lot of the rimfire ammo that's out there for, like you said, for average results. But as the ammunition's improved and technology's improved, you know, it's allowed us to dive into, you know, the faster twist barrels, dial in exactly, like you said, the barrel length, and start achieving results that people never thought would be possible out of a rimfire. And it's
exactly.
I was going to say, it's interesting. We used to build a 9-twist barrel for the Aguila 60 grain round.
Oh, cool.
Because it needed a faster twist just to stabilize and prevent the bullet from keyholing. And as all these faster twist, you know, research started coming out, we had customers that originally bought those barrels from us that are like, wait a minute, I'm going to take that back out and try it with some of these new ammunitions. And they found very similar to what you said is as they were getting out to 100 to 200 yards and even beyond that, that the 9-twist barrel that we had designed for the 60 grain was actually shooting the standard 22 LR better than what our current barrels were. Yeah, I believe it. Were you doing anything special with the chamber for those 50 grainers? We had to go, we did cut a chamber specific to that because that had the longer case on it.
Yep.
So we did cut a chamber specific to that. And, you know, in our opinion, that ammunition had limitations to what it was going to do from an accuracy standpoint. But that's not really what it was intended for, was not to be a, you know, bench rest style round.
Right.
You know, but
right.
So we're actually in the middle of doing more testing with different lengths and we're trying some new tooling on our bores themselves to see if we can start dialing in, you know, even, you know, the long range accuracy out of the semi-autos. So
yeah, 100%.
You know,
or like I think about the Summit, right? So like your Summit is kind of all over the book because like I shamelessly advertise it as my favorite squirrel rifle. And that's Mach 2 with a 16-inch, one of your carbon tension barrels. Awesome woods gun because it's so light. It's all polymer and carbon and coated metal, so it's like totally weather resistant. Like smoke show accuracy inside 100 yards, like minute of squirrel head with Mach 2 inside 100 yards. I love it. But when I'm thinking about NRL 22 or like NRL 22X, where you're starting to see targets at 300, 400 yards, you know, that Summit action with a heavy 22-inch barrel and like 1 in 12, 1 in 10, 1 in 9. I mean, that could be a game changer in a way, because then you don't have the semi-auto challenges to deal with as how that affects velocity. So your water line is good because it's a bolt action effectively. But then you have the ultimate benefit of all your rifles is that interchangeability with like the 10/22 universe, which I don't think you guys do, but I think a lot of people like underrate that, like the Voodoos, for example, or like now with the Bagaras, like awesome rifles like in and of themselves. But the fact that anybody who knows a Remington 700 can change a trigger in those, I think that is, among this community of enthusiasts that we're in, huge upside that guys see to that. Like I have a friend who's into this, and he specifically bought a Bagara because he didn't have the budget to get a higher end rifle, and is just going to sort of add components to it as he like gets funds, as he gets permission from his wife, frankly. And then eventually he'll update the barreled action, whereas like you guys have that same interchangeability, like Gold Star, in my opinion, where a guy could have his 10/22 and just drop in a Summit action or a Volquartsen barrel and like immediately see the gains and kind of build the dream rifle over time, which I think is so underrated. Like not enough people talk about how enthusiastic the market is for that kind of stuff, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. And I think the one advantage of, like you talked about, kind of building it up as you go, even like your friend that started, may not be able to afford the top end, you learn so much along the way.
100%.
Where if you just go out and buy a top end Voodoo rifle, which they're phenomenal rifles, so I'm not taking anything away from that. But for a lot of people, you miss all the learning and research that goes into getting to that point. For me, that's part of the fun is as we, keep going forward, is what really are the limits that we can do with a rimfire round. And trying different twist barrels and doing that testing, different lengths, that kind of keeps the fun into everything that we do. The NRL 22 has been awesome to see its growth over the past few years. Yeah.
And I think that's the rifles are user accessible, and the course of fires are, and the distances are. And to your point, I think a lot of guys are realizing the fun and sort of the DIY aspect of this. Some people are just shooters and want to buy a turnkey top of the line rifle and not think about triggers and just compete, and that's fine. I had one guy tell me, he said, Mario Andretti didn't work on his car. I was like, yeah, that's true, but I do both. I enjoy doing both, and all of the like ground level people, like I see at local matches, most of them are the same way. They're doing the tweaks to their rifles in their downtime to get ready for those matches, and loving it. And to your point, like learning more about the tools and the technology and the sport kind of as they go. So I'm a huge fan of that approach.
As am I, and I'm excited to see where rimfires can go over the next few years. Obviously, I hope everybody picks up a copy of the Rimfire Revolution. I think for newbies and experts, they'll enjoy it. But I wanted to get into just a couple different things quick. This is more on like your workflow and different. I'm always interested in how they organize their time and their energy throughout the day.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
So I know like with writers, a lot of times they have to go when the creativity hits them. So are there any like morning routines or anything that you do? Like, I know like when you're out in the field or out hunting, obviously that's not the case, but when you're at home, is there any morning routines or daily rituals that you have?
Yeah, 100%. And like I am like I'm a writer. Like I can't wait for the creativity to happen. Like I can't wait for the muse to show up. This is my full-time job, you know? Like you can't, like a carpenter can't like wait for the spirit to nail together some 2x4s comes together and like then decide to go out and work, you know? Like so I am a very much like discipline focused guy. I think I'm the most creative or the most like motivated really like in the morning. Like I'm a morning person. It's hunting season always throws everything off and I'm just back from a big trip. So it's a little different right now, but like the routine of like when I was writing the book or most of my day job, I work for Black Rifle Coffee on the Free Range American website. We're spinning up an outdoor website. So I'm writing and editing work for that. And like my sort of like get shit done mode is the alarm goes off fairly early between 4 and 5. I drink a lot of coffee all day long, so I have my first cup of coffee, and then I work out, which is usually typically like weight, like not heavy. I'm not trying to be Brandon Lilly, who's an awesome dude, but like I'm just not built that way. So it's like it's weights, but like not super intense. And then I'll go to the desk, and then I will, the most important writing project gets done. And usually, like, if I'm up around 4 or 5, usually between, like, 6:30 and 7:30, I'm starting the writing, and that's, like, when the book got written, right? So, like, I give myself, like, usually there's 2 hours. When I was in the grind with the book, I'd get about 4 hours where, like, the world drops away and, like, I can do the work. After that, like today I did it a little early, but I go for a run and then I eat my first meal. And then the rest of the day, if all that stuff happens, like the rest of the day, like writes itself. It's easy. It feels easy, you know, and that's when I get onto email and like I have work meetings and I edit other writers and whatnot. But, it's funny. I was just talking about this with another, podcast I did when I was in Colorado, but like I like believe in train tracks, right? And like I am by nature like lazy and not disciplined and like want to just sleep in and like shoot rifles. But so I need to like billet myself to train tracks. And if I get the day moving this way and if I'm off the routine like I am now because I just got back from the West, it might take a couple days. I try not to beat myself up, but like once I'm a week into that routine, that's when like the real productivity, like writerly, editorly, like video content wise, production happens. And it was awesome in the case of this book because I was on that routine for like months and months at a time, you know, and it worked out. So yeah, so I don't wait around to get inspired. Like I just kind of force myself to wake up and move and then sit and make it happen.
Oh, and I absolutely love that because I've structured my day very similar to what you said, where I try to get, you know, that workout in early, get the most important couple of most important things done early on right away, and then I can fall back to being more reactive to emails or phone call, whatever it may be.
Yep.
But I'm like you, if I don't start my day that way, it spirals out of control very quickly. And you know, the one thing, so you mentioned that when you work out, is a lot of your workout based around like focus to be in shape for hunting?
Yeah, like nearly all of it. Honestly,
you know, you mentioned Brandon. I know he will, if he's getting ready to go on an elk hunt or something like that, he'll actually shift his training around, you know, geared specifically towards what he has coming up.
Yep. Yeah, so like I just got back from an elk hunt, and a photographer for Black Rifle Coffee that went with us, Curtis Frazier, he actually owns a gym and he's a Jim Jones certified trainer. He's a former ranger, teaches their tactical seminar, just like all around badass. And so a couple months before this elk hunt, like I wrote him and I said, hey, I want to mix it up to get ready for this. And he wrote some programming for me that was like really heavy on step ups, lunges, squats, like all the big leg muscles, and then had a couple long efforts. So like whether pack hikes or runs or whatever, where like you're going for an hour and a half plus. And so that was a case where it was like very specific, like hunt focused programming, because I'm a flatlander, and you get up into those big mountains, and like if you don't train for it or not in shape for it, like you're gonna struggle. I mean, the elk that I killed, like I had a scale, and I'm kicking myself for not using it. I had a bow scale in the truck, but like we're guessing our packs weighed between 65 and 85 pounds, and it was a short hike, but it was still like a roller coaster of elevation and just about 2 miles, a mile and a half. And if you're going into something like that cold, it's not only just going to suck, but like you could hurt yourself, you could twist a rock on a rock or roll an ankle. So
I think it's one of those things that's often overlooked by people that don't hunt is the preparation in the months leading up to something like that. Like you said, you just can't show up and pack out an elk on a 2 mile walk if you haven't been training, to some degree in order to be able to do that. You always see guys like Cam Hanes out there running whatever he does, a marathon a day or some crazy thing. But he'll talk, a lot of it is just to stay in shape for hunting, which is, I think, an often overlooked point.
Yeah.
You have a lot of different things going on, like, with the Black Rifle Coffee, with all that. What is next for you? Do you have another big project on the horizon, or?
Yeah. So, we're going to be, we're doing some videos related to the book. So those are going to be coming out. So I'm working on edits on those. The Black Rifle Coffee stuff is really exciting. So if you go to freerangeamerican.us, that's the website for this new outdoor publication we're launching. If a lot of your listeners, when I say Free Range American, will probably think of the podcasts that like Evan and Matt and Logan and Jared do, which is awesome. Like they're killing it. It's a great podcast. But that has just recently been rebranded to the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast. And so through the end, in the end of this year, in the coming months, we're going to be spinning up new social, new YouTube, and we're hiring, if anyone out there is looking for work, more staff to kind of grow this like Free Range American hunting, fishing, shooting brand. So that's like really exciting, like talking to video producers and like battle planning hunt videos and gear videos, and talking with like buddies like Curtis, who's going to join the team, who's just a badass photographer and like a wizard on Instagram Reels, and like talking about how we're going to do it a little differently in the hunting world. So Free Range American is definitely getting like most of my powder through this fall. But like this Sunday, I'm hosting I match direct my local NRL 22 match. I'm looking at my shooting bench, and there's 2 rifles on it right now. So I'm always going to be. I'm not going anywhere as far as the rimfire stuff is going, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's awesome. And where can people pick up your book at? I believe it's available at Amazon, and is it available at all the major bookstores?
Yes, sir. Anywhere books are sold. It's supposed to be on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, if anyone still does that. I hope if someone sees it there, like send me a picture, because like I've been looking for it, and I don't think it's shown up on shelves near me yet. But yeah, anywhere books are sold. Amazon, GunDigestStore.com. For a long time, the Gun Digest store was the least expensive place to get it, but Amazon changes prices like hourly, so I can't commit to that anymore. But there's the hard copy and then the Kindle edition. And I will throw this out there, like just as like a user tip, like there's a lot of full color photos and a lot of charts. There's a listing of like all available 22 chambers and their specs in the book. And the feedback I'm getting on the Kindle edition is like, it's great for reading through it, but it makes a poor reference. So like if you're like a rimfire nerd, I would definitely recommend a hard copy just because I think it's a little easier to get in the weeds of the tables and the photo captions and whatnot.
And the one thing that I'll add that we didn't discuss here is if you're interested in the history of how the rimfire got started, the beginning of the book is excellent covering all that. And I know personally I learned a lot just even reading, how the rimfire got started and how it came to be. So yeah, that was very interesting. So yeah, like I said, if you're into rimfire at all, if you're into shooting at all, I think people would enjoy this book. So I highly recommend it.
I'm glad you said that because like the one of the things that you asked me what surprised me, and like I got really into the history of shooting and rifles and like how firearms developed, how the Industrial Revolution influenced it. And it was like, how do you write about that? And early in the book, and I think whether you shoot rimfire or like you're any kind of gun person, I think there's a lot of value prototype of that in London that the Frenchman Flaubert put together. And then they came back and over many years, they basically figured out how to make what became the 22 short. And like in that story, as far as I read it and tried to tell it, is like the entire history of like how guns and ammo work and how like self-contained metallic cartridges that feed in a firearm work. So like if you have any interest in like how ammunition works, like how guns work, like to me the history wasn't like just some dry kind of like Wikipedia entry. It was like I was like, holy shit, as I was reading this and researching this, like everything you need to know about how your modern precision $5,000 rifle works can be explained with the 22 short. And that to me was like really eye-opening, and like it's one of my favorite parts of the work, frankly.
Yeah, I would agree with you because I found that fascinating reading through there. And, like you said, it's crazy to think how much of what we do today all came from that original 22 short round.
Yeah. I mean, all of them, like all center fire, like all ammunition is kind of a child of that round. And yeah, it's fascinating, the when you look at like the genealogy of this technology, it goes back deep. And when you read on those histories, like you can see the threads forward that bring us to kind of where we are today. That to me was really exciting.
The one thing that always fascinates me about that too is, you look at how ammunition is produced today with the equipment and technology that we have, or firearms for that matter too. And then you look with what they had to work with and what they were able to do. It's really amazing that they were able to do what they did.
Oh, yeah. And like before World War II, like 200-yard rimfire matches were a thing. Like those were NRA matches, like small bore rifle, where they were shooting 200 and even in some cases 300 yards. So the upheaval that was World War II sort of changed the way Americans' relationship to firearms, and the world's relationship, frankly. But prior to that, like it had always been a hyper accurate target round, even at very long distances. And that was just something that was kind of lost in the translation, if you will, or lost time when production of ammunition and firearms kind of changed, and it became like rather than having a high dollar target rifle that like an affluent Easterner is going to shoot at Creedmoor. It became, let's get a squirrel rifle in every house in America. And that is also a good thing. It's not like one is better than the other, but when the industry kind of went that way in the 1950s, it sort of left behind these extreme, these like accuracy obsessed shooters, and specifically rimfire shooters.
Yes. And it's so good to see it all coming back full circle.
100%. Yeah, nothing new is what's that quote? Like, nothing under the sun is new, or there's nothing new under the sun.
Something like that, yeah.
Repeating. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it a lot, Michael. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was fun for me to be able to dive into this. And like I said, I enjoyed the book. Where's the best place that people can follow you if they want to, send you pictures of your book on the shelves, or just, interact with you? Yeah,
100%. My probably Instagram. I think like everybody else, I'm at Michael R. Shea. I'm probably on there most often. I have a author page on Facebook. It's Michael R. Shea. But yeah, at Michael R. Shea on Instagram is pretty quick. My messages are wide open, so I get them all that come in. So if you see something or want to chat or have questions, shoot me a message.
Well, once again, I appreciate it and thank you. And if anybody out there has any questions or suggestions for the show, please make sure and let us know at podcast@volkortson.com. Leave us a review, give us some feedback, good or bad. And as always, thank you for listening.